welcome. We're glad you could join us, at least by video. We're going to start the service here in a little bit. It'll be coming on right after this short introduction. We're glad that we're able to do this. We're glad we're able to put this online. One of my concerns, though, is that this becomes a substitute for church for you. This is really not church. Church is that gathering together. Over and over, Jesus says, when you come together, when you come together. And that's what we need to do. Now, I know that some of you are afraid. Some of us certainly need to stay distanced for a while. We pray, though, that you don't make this the new habit, the new norm. This is good for a little bit of teaching, a little bit of information, but it's not a replacement for the church. Don't let yourself get into the habit of not gathering together. I hope you're able to come. If you're in Fort Wayne, in this area, I hope you're able to come and join us. If you're in another area, we know we have people watching from other states, other cities. I'd encourage you to find a church, a group that you can get together with. Share your gifts, your talents, encourage one another, build one another up. I don't know if you sing along with the songs as we do this or not. We're still working on getting the video a little bit more tailored to be something that is a little bit fuller, a little bit clearer for you to be able to join in, sing along, and we hope connect with God in a good way. So enjoy the service, enjoy the video, but again, I encourage you, gather together with some. May God bless you and continue to guide you in all that you do. Thanks for watching. One family has a sick member and they're a large family, and then you get two families that do that. It affects a lot of things right now, but we're glad that you're here, glad you're feeling well enough to be able to come. And I was just thinking through yesterday. I was in Meyer, and I was just looking around at all these masked people and thinking, who'd ever have thought, I mean, I remember watching the news and seeing people, in the Far East and different countries, and they'd show scenes of them in the city walking around, and some had masks on, some didn't, and I always thought, that's odd, I'm not sure why you'd wear a mask. As I stood there in my mask, looking around Meyer. So this morning, what I was thinking was, as I was reflecting back on that, let me make a suggestion to you. Watch the news less and read your Bible more. Just a thought for you. Just a thought for you, watch the news less, read your Bible more. A good book for you to read, seriously, is a book of Zephaniah. How many of you read that this week? Read it. I was reading through it this morning, actually, and I thought, Lord, this is today. People talk about, the Bible and how current the Bible is or isn't. Well, I think they're looking at it backwards, really. The Bible is always current. It's with what's going on, where are we at in what the Bible has to say, but that's another story. So I was reading through Zephaniah, just thinking how current it was, and you're going to start reading and you're going to think, what? He's nuts. Read the whole book. It's 3 chapters, for pity's sake. It's not going to take you that long. But the verse in chapter 3 that really grabbed my attention this morning. The Lord your God is among you, a warrior who saves. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will bring you quietness with his love. He will delight in you with shouts of joy. Isn't that a great picture? Isn't that just a great reality of our God and the God we serve? The warrior who saves, the one who rejoices over us with gladness. the one who brings quietness with his love. Boy, we can get ourselves stirred up. We can let other things get us stirred up. The Lord is the one who brings us quietness with his love. Let's pray. Father, what a gracious God you are. The reality of you and your presence, so comforting, so calming. At least it should be. When we find ourselves less than calm, it might be an indicator to us that we are not really resting in you as we should, that we are letting anything, something else, get more of our attention than you. Now, Father, it's not that upsetting things don't happen, and you've told us that we will face troubles and tribulation in this world, but you went on and said, be of good cheer. You have overcome this world. And the verse I read this morning from Zephaniah, just that reminder that you are the one who brings quietness with your love. We need to rest in that more and more, Lord. Not just what's going on in our society, but many are facing challenges of their own. That even if things were humming along like they were before all of this pandemic stuff, that they would still have challenges to be calm. You know what's going on in each and every life that's here. You know what is happening even better than we do. What is encouraging to me is that you are greater than anything we face. So, Father, when we get troubled, remind us to not only come to you, but remind us again of who you are. Remind us again of you are that God, that warrior who saves. That you are the one who brings quietness with your love. That you are the one who rejoices over us. Father, that is just an astounding thing to me. Help us now to be able to rejoice in you. I thank you for your scriptures, your word. It's going to be read and shared with us here in a little bit, and ask that you would make that connection for us. We need that. Make that a reality even more for us. We're going to be singing songs. Some of them are an expression of praise and thanks. Others are recognizing what a great and mighty God you are. So, Father, continue to do great things. Continue to do those things which you, in your power, in your love, and in your glory, you alone can do. We cannot. We cannot bring that quietness that we need. That only comes from you. So, Father, thank you for this time to step aside a little bit, to be together with other believers, to be seeking you, and to be among those who want to turn our attention and focus to you. Our minds will drift a little bit as we're going through the service. Just remind us and draw us back again to you. And Father, our minds will drift as we leave this place. But again, I ask that you will draw us back to you. Use this time in your transforming power to make us more like Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. Thanks for coming.
Morning. I'll be reading from Isaiah chapter 40. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or marked off the heavens with the span of his hand? Who has gathered the dust of the earth in a measure, or weighed the mountains on a balance, and the hills on the scales? Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord, or who gave him counsel? Who did he consult? Who gave him understanding and taught him the paths of justice? Who taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? Look, the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are considered as a speck of dust on the scales. He lifts up the islands like fine dust. Lebanon's cedars are not enough for fuel, or its animals enough for a burnt offering. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are considered by him as empty nothingness. With whom will you compare God? What likeness will you set up for comparison with him? An idol? Something that a smelter casts and a metal worker plates with gold and makes silver chains for? A poor person contributes wood for a pedestal that will not rot. He looks for a skilled craftsman to set up an idol that will not fall over. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning? Have you not considered the foundations of the earth? God is enthroned above the circle of the earth. Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like thin cloth and spreads them out like a tent to live in. He reduces princes to nothing and makes judges of the earth like a wasteland. They are barely planted, barely sown. Their stem hardly takes root in the ground when he blows them, and they wither, and a whirlwind carries them away like stubble. To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal? Asks the Holy One. Look up and see, who created these? He brings out the stars by number. He calls all of them by name. Because of his great power and strength, not one of them is missing. Jacob, why do you say, and Israel, why do you assert? My way is hidden from the Lord, and my claim is ignored by God. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never becomes faint or weary. There is no limit to his understanding. He gives strength to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Youths may become faint and weary, but young men stumble and fall. But those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint.
The second scripture reading is from John, chapter 10, and I'll be starting with verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father.
Please stand together, please, as we sing, Behold Our God.
Kings and nations tremble.
As we were singing that song, I was thinking to myself, you just said a bunch of words you're not even going to use the rest of the week. Did you catch that? I mean, you did. I even kind of wonder if you'd use the word fold even this week again. But, we sang a lot of words we're not going to use this week, but I hope that you also sang about something you're going to use a lot this week, and that's faith. To be able to walk, to be able to know, to be able to understand a little bit more of who God is, what He's done for us, His care and love for us, that relationship we're able to have with Him because of what He's done. The other songs we're singing, and being able to behold our God. I hope this isn't the only time you do that. I hope that throughout the week your eyes are open even more to Him and His greatness all around us and who He is. Our offering is just a expression of our faith in Him. He provides for us, and we give back to Him out of gratitude, out of thanks. As the ushers come forward to receive our gifts and our offerings, just a reminder for you as they're not going to pass the plate down the aisle. They'll hold on to it. If you have something you want to put in there, you can reach over and drop it in. If you're uncomfortable with that, there is a plate in the back that you can drop your offering in as we leave. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the relationship we can have with you through faith. And that is not just limited to this building and these four walls. We get to walk with you through each day. We do get to behold our God seated on His throne. Father, we are so appreciative that you reached down to us, touched our lives, that you provided for us in Christ, that you provide for us each and every day. We give back now part of what you've entrusted to our care. We ask that you would use it, that others would come to know Christ, who he is, what he's done, his love, his grace, his power. That they might come into that relationship with him, that we might grow in him. Father, thank you for this opportunity and privilege we give in his name. Amen.
The Faithful Hall of Fame, Joseph. This is Joseph, who's the son of Israel and Rachel. Joseph was the most loved of all his brothers, so his brothers hated him. After being sold into slavery and put in jail, Joseph found favor with the Pharaoh and ruled over all of Egypt. He helped Egypt thrive during 7 years of abundance, and then he was prepared for 7 years of famine because God had helped Joseph to understand the Pharaoh's dreams about what would happen to Egypt. Now, during this time, Joseph's brothers came to seek his help, and after testing them, Joseph told them who he was, and he forgave his brothers for all the trouble they had put him through. But Joseph had not seen his father for many years. So he sent for Israel and his brothers' families. Together they all traveled to the land of Egypt, where Joseph would provide for them in the famine. Pharaoh allowed Joseph and all his brothers to settle in one of the best parts of Egypt. And finally, Joseph was reunited with his father. Joseph lived 110 years and saw 3 generations of his family flourish in the land. Before Joseph died, he told his brothers of the future of Egypt. He told them of the exodus that would take place, meaning that they would all return to the promised land of their father Israel, his father Isaac, and his father Abraham. He made his brothers promise that when they left the land of Egypt, they would take his bones with them and bury them in the promised land. Joseph always lived with hope that God would deliver him and his people. Though many people meant to show him harm throughout his life, God meant it all for good, so that many people should live because of his faith.
Well, last week in Genesis, and next week we're going to start in 2 Chronicles chapter 7. I mentioned that to you last week, and a few people have started reading already in there. Oh, my sunglasses, thanks. That wouldn't be good. Go outside and I wouldn't be able to see. Oh, I don't need those up there, do I? If you're bored this week and you want to get a little jump on where we're going to be, 2 Chronicles chapter 7 next week is where we're going to start. Be in there for, I don't know how long. We're just going to get into it and see how long God has us linger there. Let's pray. Father, thanks for your word, your truth to us, and it is that. Don't let us forget that. Don't let us forget that it is your truth. Don't let us forget that it is indeed something that can help us not only understand you, but understand ourselves, understand how we are and can live better for you, face those challenges, those things that come along. So use your word today and teach us, reach us. Again, you know what's going on in every life here. I couldn't possibly know. And you know what's coming. Boy, that one's way beyond me. So as you work and as you prepare us, help us to give our attention to you here and in the days to come, we pray. In Christ's name, amen. When I moved to Fort Wayne, well, a little over 30 years ago now, I began to notice some of the ways things were done differently here than they are in Chicago. One of the very first things I remember noticing that was done differently was a fog delay. A what? You know, a fog delay, a delay of any kind. A school delay, we didn't, I think they do them in Chicago now, they never did before. And the whole time that I was in school, we only missed school for a few days in 1967 when there was a snowstorm, and we missed it. That was the only time we missed school at all because of weather. The entire time I was there. Part of it is because they throw so much salt down on the roads in Chicago that the snow melts when it's 3 feet off the ground, and your cars rust out just from being parked in the garage. But at any rate, that was one of the first differences I noticed. Another one came to mind just earlier last week, end of last week I think it was. I met with Peyton and Katie, talk about their wedding, and it reminded me of the first wedding I did here. I came out here with Peyton and Katie, and we talked about where people are going to stand and all that. And I remember the first wedding I did here, I did the same thing. We talked about where people were going to stand and where they were going to come in from. And the couple looked at me and said, "Where are we going to get dressed?" I thought it was a trick question. I said, "At home?" And they, that's when I learned, that the people got dressed at the church. It was the very first time that ever happened to me. I mean, I'd done plenty of weddings in Chicago and been to plenty of weddings, and everybody got dressed at home. It just seemed to make, but it was just a little different. One of the differences I am still impressed with after over 30 years of being here is the respect that many people show when a funeral procession comes by. That, people pull over, many people pull over and stop, and that I am still impressed by that. In Chicago, my goodness, we had people cut into the funeral processions, and it was nutso city. But I'm still impressed by that. When you think about it, what a great display of respect and honor and camaraderie, expressed to people that you don't even know. And I'm still impressed by that. The final chapter of Genesis here begins with a funeral, a huge display of respect, and honor and camaraderie. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 50, so if you want to turn there. We started this series 12 years ago. We did. We started this series in March of 2008, and it was just meant at that time it was going to be a focus during the summer. And as can happen, I kind of got carried away a little bit. That first series was titled A Good Start, and it covered from chapter 1 through the beginning of chapter 11, and 19 sermons. Well, it's a little bit longer than summer. And then in 2009, the very next year, we followed it up with the series God and Me, and we covered chapter 11, the beginning of chapter 11, verse 10, through chapter 29, and we did that in 14 sermons. And then something happened, and there was a 9-year break. We picked the series up again in April of 2018, and we looked at it under the banner of My People, and it was 16 sermons. It covered chapters 23 through the very first verse of chapter 37. And then we skipped a year again, and this past February, finally, we picked it up again in chapter 37, looking at it under that banner of Out of Control. And after today, we'll have covered it in 18 more messages. So that's 67 messages spread over 12 years. Not what I expected, but here we are. Here we are in chapter 50. At the end of chapter 49, Jacob died. So that's at the end of chapter 49. Jacob dies. Chapter 50, we get into his funeral. Follow along, verse 1. says, then Joseph, leaning over his father's face, wept and kissed him. He commanded his servants who were physicians to embalm his father, so they embalmed Israel. They took 40 days to complete this, for embalming takes that long, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning were over, Joseph said to Pharaoh's household, if I have found favor with you, please tell Pharaoh that my father made me take an oath, saying, I am about to die. You must bury me there in the tomb that I made for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go and bury my father, then I will return. So Pharaoh said, go and bury your father in keeping with your oath. Then Joseph went to bury his father, and all of Pharaoh's servants, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt went with him, along with all of Joseph's household, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children and their sheep and their cattle were left in the land of Goshen. I was kind of wondering who was babysitting. Just one of those thoughts comes to mind. Verse 9, horses and chariots went up with him. It was a very impressive procession. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad, which is across the Jordan, they lamented and wept loudly, and Joseph mourned 7 days for his father. When the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw this mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, this is a solemn mourning on the part of the Egyptians. Therefore, the place is called Abel Mizraim. It is across the Jordan. So Jacob's sons did for him what he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in a cave at Machpelah in the field near Mamre, which Abraham had purchased as a burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After Joseph buried his father, he returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone with him to bury his father. Now we're going to stop there for just a minute and just some observations for us. Now notice it says it took 40 days for embalming and 70 days of mourning. Now don't think of embalming as it's done today. You know, we think 40 days for embalming. Think of it more as dehydrating. I mean, that was kind of the process. They would remove the internal organs and kind of dry out the rest of the flesh on the body, maybe a little bit more than you wanted to know. But there's the 40-day, there's the 40-day process. The 70 days of mourning probably ran concurrently with the 40 days. It probably was, it most likely, started when he died, and then 70 days, not waiting the 40 days and then what it was. But it says after 70 days, then they traveled for burial. Verse 10 says when they reached that threshing floor of Atad, they lamented loudly. And Joseph mourned his father 7 days. Now, this was a long trip. This was not something, we're used to funeral processions that are relatively short. This was a long, big, involved process. Probably a sad trip, but a trip, too, that's full of memories. They're going back to the land, that they were from and, going back home, sort of. And then it says that there's another 7 days of mourning. As I was reading this, I think it's a reminder to us to take time to grieve. Take time to grieve. We don't do this well. As a culture, as a society, as a bunch of, don't be offended, as a bunch of white people in America, we don't do this. We don't do this well. What we do is we spend time trying to avoid grieving. We spend time trying to avoid grieving and trying to keep busy. And trying to, it's a process, though, that we need. And there's nothing wrong with it. God says, that he wants us to grieve not like the rest who have no hope. Did you catch that? He doesn't say don't grieve. He says our grieving is a little different. The average grieving time, they tell us, they being those who study these things, the average grieving time is 2 years. And so what that means is, that we work to suppress this, we put in extra effort to suppress it for 2 years, but that doesn't mean you're done after that. What it means is it takes us a couple of years to make adjustments. You don't get over it. I've had people tell me, when am I going to get over this? You don't get over it. You don't. You get over the flu, you get over, a broken leg. Those are things you get over. But the death of someone you adjust to. You make adjustments, and adjustments take time. It takes time to do that. a piece of your life is missing, no matter who it is. For some, we lose some that are much closer to us than others, but even those that are a little more distant, there's still some adjustments we have to make. And we need to take the time. We need to take the time to grieve, because a piece is missing. Now, let me also say, there's a time to grieve, and there's a time to no longer let grief control you. You see, like I said, it's not something you get over. It's where you make adjustments, but you don't let grief control you, and that's not disrespectful. Look at what it says in verse 14. After Joseph buried his father, he returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone with him. The time of grief directing their day had passed. In Ecclesiastes, it says there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Statistically, I will be the first one in our family to go. I mean, statistically, I'm the oldest, I'm the male, and, so that's what's going to most likely happen. But I don't want my family stuck in the moment of my death. I don't want them stuck there. I want them motivated by my life. I want them to be motivated by the person that I was, by the things that were important to me, by the things we shared together, and I want them to be motivated by that. I want them to live to the fullest life, to the fullest that God has for them. So I was working on this. I thought, and I even paused and looked it up on YouTube. That song by Leanne Womack. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that she's the one who sang it. I Hope You Dance. It's not a Christian song, but I thought, play this at my funeral, seriously. Because my hope is not that my family gets stuck in that, but that they can go on, that they can enter into life in a new way and enjoy it and smile. Well, look at verse 7. It says, Then Joseph went to bury his father. All Pharaoh's servants, elders, his household, all the elders of the land went with him, along with all of Joseph's household, his brothers, and his father's household. You get the idea? It's a big procession here. It's a big thing. And here's the picture for us, to show that respect, that honor, that camaraderie when it's called for. That respect of the person, of the people, the honor, that camaraderie, you see, that joining together. At a funeral, one of the things that people always say is, boy, I hope this isn't the only time we get together. But it is a time you get together. You see? It is a time that pulls you together. And that whole unfolding there. Jacob was important to Joseph and his brothers. And many of the folks who went with Joseph may not even have known Jacob. They were there because they knew Joseph and his family. We've all gone to funerals where, we didn't really know the person. Jenny has a viewing this afternoon of someone at work's brother passed away. She's planning on going. She didn't know the person who passed away, but she knows the brother. And it's that respect, that honor, that camaraderie that's there. Now look at that, all these people that went with Joseph, and I'm sure many of these people had other things to do. They had other things, and what they did, they set things aside, and they took the time to travel and to be with Joseph and his family. I don't think you realize sometimes how much your presence means, what a difference just your presence means to others. When my mother died, Kent and Sarah drove to Chicago for the funeral. 6 hours on the road, 3 hours there, 3 hours back, and all the time there. But now it's not just funerals. I mean, we're looking at talk about funerals. That's certainly one of them, but it's not just funerals. many of you drove over to Aurora, Illinois for Pete and Jess's wedding. 8 hours on the road, 4 hours there, 4 hours back. It's just your presence. Your presence means more than you realize. And here's just when you show up, seek to be authentic rather than profound. Because your presence means more than clever sayings. Your presence means more to them than you trying to be profound, than you trying to come up with something clever. You go to a funeral, tell them you're sorry. And then be quiet and listen. Job was a wealthy man. We're familiar with, some of us familiar with Job in the Bible. And he was a wealthy man, and he had all sorts of stuff. And then in very short order, it says he lost all his possessions, he lost all his children, he lost all of his wealth, he even lost his physical comfort. He lost all of those things in very short order. We're told that Job's friends came to comfort him on his loss, and they sat with him in silence, it says, for a week. They sat with him in silence for a week. And then they opened their mouths and put their foot in it because they were trying to be profound. Because they were trying to say something clever. And now, if you remember what they even did, they got to the point where they began to accuse Job. Think about that. These friends who came to comfort him on the loss of all of his children. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine. And then when they were trying to be profound, they began accusing Job of being a sinner. Just seek to be authentic. You're a friend, go there and be a friend. Let's pick up verse 15. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said to one another, if Joseph is holding a grudge against us, he will certainly repay us for all the suffering we caused him. So they sent this message to Joseph. Before he died, your father gave a command. Say this to Joseph, please forgive your brothers' transgressions and their sin, the suffering they caused you. Therefore, please forgive the transgression of your servants, of the God of your father. Joseph wept when their message came to him. Then his brothers also came to him and bowed down before him, just like Joseph said would happen in his dreams, all those years before. They came down and bowed before him and said, we are your slaves. Verse 19, but Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You planned evil against me. God planned it for good, to bring about the present results, the survival of many people. Therefore, don't be afraid. I will take care of you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Now we're going to pause there again. You got this picture. Joseph's brothers knew that they sinned against Joseph. They knew that. There wasn't any question in their mind that they had wronged Joseph. And this brought up a concern, and they expected now that Joseph would take revenge. They knew they had wronged him, and they knew, that they had it coming in a sense, and they kind of expected that this was a time where it was going to unfold. Think about this. Almost after 40 years, they're still worried about their sin against Joseph. This is still what is controlling their life. And apparently they had not yet come to Joseph, looking for forgiveness, seeking for forgiveness. After all of these years, after all of this time together, unconfessed sin will begin to control you. You have unconfessed sin, it will begin to control. This is why some families break apart. This is why some friendships break apart. Because this unconfessed sin begins to control us. And when you have that unconfessed sin, then you begin to avoid the one that you sinned against. Maybe you start by simply acting differently around them. Whatever it is for you, overly nice or overly quiet or whatever it might be, you just start acting different. Well, then, before long, in your mind, then you begin to blame them. You begin to blame them and talk about how much it's their fault for this divide. The reality is you allowed unconfessed sin to drive a wedge between you and someone else. And you allowed that unconfessed sin to drive that wedge and push you further apart. Removing that wedge between you and others is important. So Jesus said this about it. He says, but I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Now we could pause there and say a lot. Anyone who is angry with his brother, and we say, but, and, you know, the little motorboat thing. Anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Whoever says to his brother, fool, will be subject to the Sanhedrin. But whoever says, you moron, will be subject to hellfire. So, if you are offering your gift on the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. Go first and be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. What he's saying is that getting this relationship straightened out with your brother is important, more important than coming to worship and express your commitment to God, even though you're ignoring it in your relationship to your brother. When Jesus was asked, what's the most important command? And what did he say? He answered the question and he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And then he went on and he said, and the second is like it, to love your brother as yourself. You see that importance of that relationship there. What we need to do is step up and seek forgiveness for your sin. We need to do that. Step up and seek forgiveness for you. Certainly you confess to God first. All sin is always against God. We mentioned that last week. We've mentioned it many times over the last 30 years. All sin is always against God. So first you confess it to God, and then pray, pray and ask God to help you work out that hostility between you and the other person. Seek forgiveness from God, and then pray and go. Put action to that prayer and go and get the thing straightened out with the other person. Now, the problem is often not, one-sided. But here's the deal. You can only work on your side of the problem. So do that. You can only work on your side of the problem. You can only work on what you did. So don't excuse yourself. Don't try. When you go to them, don't try to get them to confess their guilt. That's not the point. When you're going and confessing for what you did wrong, don't excuse yourself. Don't try to get them to confess. Romans 12 is pretty clear. It says, never pay back anyone. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Okay, so let me just give you a little quiz here. How often should you pay back? Never. And to just select people? To anyone, it says. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men, if possible, as far as it depends on you. You working on your part. As far as it depends on you, you do all you can on your part. You can't control their part, but you can control your part. As much as depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge. Again, let me ask you, how often can you take revenge? Well, that's the biblical answer, isn't it? We have trouble with that in reality, but here's what it says. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. And we say, let me help you out, God. Let me help you out, God. You're not doing it fast enough for me. You're not doing it violent enough for me. You're not suppressing them. You're not doing it. I want it done, and I want it done now. Let me help you out, God. Now, when we hear it say that way, we say, well, it's a little arrogant. It's a little, yeah. What we do is we step into the role. We step into God's role. Who? I don't want to offend you, but who do you think you are? The verse, this is very clear instruction. You do not need a theology degree to understand these verses. You don't need any type of degree at all to understand these verses. Very clear instruction. What we need to do is to obey God. What we need to do is to apply these verses to our lives. Well, the brothers say, went to Joseph, said, well, before Dad died, before your father died, end of verse 16, he gave a command. Say to Joseph, please forgive your brother's transgressions and their sin, the suffering they caused you. Now, it's not recorded. This isn't recorded anywhere else that Jacob said this to them. But it certainly is within reason to think that Jacob would have encouraged his sons to repent and settle this issue with Joseph. Once that he found out Joseph was alive, he could have been telling them for the last 17 years, between the time he found out that Joseph was alive until the time he passed. He could have been telling them for 17 years, look, get this straightened out with your brother. You wronged him. You need to go to him and talk to him. We looked last week, the maturing of the man Jacob, and as we saw that over the years, I think to me, it would seem natural that he would have been telling them, get this straightened out. Quit waiting and do what you can to clear up anything between you and someone else, particularly family members. As much as depends on you, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all. Quit waiting and do what you can to clear things up. Now, I don't know if Joseph's brothers prayed about this before they approached Joseph. But what I do know as I look at this is Joseph's response makes it very clear that God was working in his life, in Joseph's life. Look at what he says, verse 19. Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? There you go. See, there it is. Am I in the place of God? Romans wasn't even written yet, but Joseph is living it out. He knew vengeance wasn't his, it was God's. Am I in the place of God? Verse 20, you planned evil against me, God planned it for good, to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. If you're looking at, if you're in your own Bible, just write Romans 8:28 right next to that. And then you can look it up later. And all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. You see the providence of God, you see here. Verse 21, therefore don't be afraid. I will take care of you and your little ones. And he comforted them, spoke kindly to them. Comforted, spoke kindly to those who had sold him into slavery. This is another side of the forgiveness equation for us here, when we are the ones who are wronged. When the wrong is done against us and someone comes to us seeking forgiveness, let me give you the short answer. Forgive them. Forgive them. You don't make them pay. If you make them pay, you haven't forgiven them. Forgive others. Don't hold a grudge. Don't hold a grudge. Forgive others. Instead, look for the good that God can bring from this, for you and for others. Look at the good that God can bring, may already be bringing from you and in others, for you and for others. Don't let these things drag out. Let's finish this up. Verse 22. Joseph and his father's household remained in Egypt. Joseph lived 110 years. Pretty cool, isn't it? I mean, I think as long as you're healthy. The thing is, that's short for his ancestors, and that he went early. Verse 23, he saw Ephraim's son to the third generation. How cool. Man, I'd love to see great-grandchildren. Great-grandchildren. Oh, my goodness. The third generation of the sons of Manasseh's son, Machir, were recognized by Joseph. Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will certainly come to your aid and bring you up from this land, the land that he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Joseph made the sons of Israel take an oath. When God comes to your aid, you are to carry my bones up from here. Joseph died at the age of 110, and they embalmed him and placed him in a coffin in Egypt. Joseph lived over 90 years in Egypt. He came when he was 17. He died when he was 110. Over 90 years he lived in Egypt as a slave. Even when he was in Pharaoh's service, he was a slave to Pharaoh. He was elevated and had a good position, but he was a slave in Pharaoh's household still. These verses here, 22 through 26, they cover over 50 years of Joseph's life, and we're given very few details. As I was reading this, I thought, Joseph's brothers, they might have left after, Dad died. Might have left after that, but it seems they would have wanted to go back to the promised land. I don't know why they didn't. But maybe we're given a little bit of a glimpse by what we're told in the beginning of Exodus. Exodus chapter 1 says, "Then Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were fruitful, increased rapidly, multiplied, and became extremely numerous, so that the land was filled with them." See, things were going well for them there, so maybe that's why they stayed. Then it says, "A new king who had not known Joseph came to power in Egypt. He said to his people, 'Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and powerful than we are. Let us deal shrewdly with them.' And they put him into slavery for hundreds of years." As I read these last several verses in Genesis chapter 50, I wonder if the changes maybe already started taking place before Joseph died. Look what he says. He says, "God will certainly come to your aid and bring you up from this land to the land he promised." He says, "When God comes to your aid, you're to carry my bones up from here." Maybe some of this already started. We don't know. We're not told. But what we do see in these verses is the same thing we have been seeing throughout the entire book of Genesis. From the very beginning to the end, and that's the providence of God unfolding. And the providence of God overrules the expectations of man. Every single time. From the introduction of sin into God's perfection in the garden, where he created things perfect, and sin came in and it began to mess with things there. All right, from there we still see the providence of God overruling. Through the repeated rebellions over and over again of those who knew him, and their actions of those who denied him and followed false gods, over and over again we see the providence of God, and the providence of God overruling the expectations of man. God didn't always do what others expected. He didn't, he didn't do that because the providence of God always overrules the expectations, the rebellion, the sin, and the independence of man. When you think things are out of control, make sure your relationship with God is right. Make sure, as best you can, your relationship with others is right. Trust and walk in the providence of God. No better place to be. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you are a God who is not surprised by things that are going on in this world right now where we live. None of this surprises you. Some of this aggravates us, and some of this I know breaks your heart. Help us to begin to see even more your hand at work. Help us begin to see and to understand it's not our expectations that matter. It's you, your wisdom, your power, your plan, in your time, by your design. We sang faith is the victory, Father. That overcomes the world. Remind us again of what a great God we serve. Thank you for the book of Genesis. I thank you for the time that we could spend in it. I thank you for the information. I thank you for the encouragement, the challenge, the correction that comes from your word and your truth. Help us to always walk and live in it, we pray. In Christ's name, amen. Would you stand together for the benediction, please? And as we close in prayer, Pete, would you be able to be up here to pray with people? Peter's one of our deacons. He'll be up here to pray with you and to pray for you. If you need prayer for anything, maybe it's something we talked about in the message. Maybe you realize you haven't been trusting God. Maybe you realize there's somebody you need to make things right with, and you want someone to pray with you, or maybe you just had a tough week or have a challenging week coming up and you want someone to pray with you and to pray for you, Peter will be up here. So as we dismiss, you feel free to come forward and he'll pray with you and for you. And now unto him who is able to keep us from falling and to set us before his presence without fault and with great joy, to the only wise God, our Savior, be glory, majesty, power, and dominion both now and forevermore. And all of God's people said.